to Warhammer 40k lore in the Bible, where I pull from Warhammer 40k lore to help explain biblical lore. And today we're going to be going over the Adeptus Ministorum, or the Ecclesiarchy. But before we get into the video, take the wikis with a grain of salt, and I'm not a lore expert. Also, I do a comedy series within the Warhammer 40k bulk gun game, so if you want to check that out, I'll put that in the description. There's also a playlist on this channel because that's where it started, but of course, YouTube doesn't like promoting content to different audiences, so I had to make another channel for it. But I'll put it in the description. And if you like what you see, please consider a like and subscription. Alright, let's go ahead and get started. The Adeptus Ministorum, more commonly known as the Ecclesiarchy, is the official state church of the Imperium of Man, which maintains and promotes the worship of the Emperor of mankind as the one true God of humanity. It is a massive organization that guides the worship of trillions of people on numberless worlds and across a great divide of distance, language, and culture. The core of the Ecclesiarchy's spiritual and temporal power is the Cult Imperialis, also known variously as the Imperial Creed or Imperial Cult. The foundation of the Cult Imperialis is the belief in and worship of the Emperor as a divine being, the power of the Emperor to intercede in matters spiritual and temporal, the power of prayer to bring about a change in mortal circumstances throughout the intercession of the Emperor, and the divine right of mankind to rule the stars. The Adeptus Ministorum also administers and spreads the imperial cult throughout the territory of the Imperium. Though any imperial religious cult or sect must ultimately adhere to the core theology of the Imperial Creed, the possibility for conflicting interpretation means that in practice, the Cult Imperialis is an agglomeration of many different or differing schools of theology or theological thought. Whilst agreeing in essence, cults and sects across the galaxy often differ on particular tenets of beliefs or modes of worship. To many, the Emperor is a god of war, to others, savior and bringer of light, and to some, a stern judge of the... It sounds just like Christianity. We can't just have different opinions. We got to make certain sects, and we're the ones who right. But anyways, I digress. Inevitably, simple differences of emphasis of faith can become points of hostility and even the cause of red mist shed. Many merciless and savage wars have resulted in time and again over such fine points of theological doctrine. Although the interpretation of particular dogmas of the Imperial Creed varies across the many worlds of the Imperium, any extreme deviance from its structures in theology is considered heresy and dealt with great severity by the Ecclesiarchy, or in extreme cases, the Ordo Hereticus of the Imperial Inquisition. The Cult Mechanicus, whilst actually a very different religion from the Imperial Cult, is tolerated by the Ecclesiarchy under the terms of the ancient Treaty of Mars, which allowed the tech priests of the Red Planet to maintain their faith in the face of atheistic imperial truth. And also because they need warships and dreadnoughts and all that stuff. But anyways, after the Imperium was transformed into essentially a theocracy in the early 32nd millennium, the Adeptus Mechanicus agreed to a theological compromise with the Ecclesiarchy, which saw the Emperor officially as the Omnissiah, or physical embodiment of their machine god. However, rampant distrust between the adherents of both imperial faiths continues to simmer just beneath the surface, and the Ecclesiarchy and the Mechanicus often view each other as political rivals. Of course. The Adeptus Ministorum is based on Holy Terra, its urban ecclesiarchal palace covering nearly all the southernmost continent of Antarctica. Okay. The origins. During the Great Crusade, many different religious cults, drawing on the book written by Primarch Logar, Lorgar, known as Lectitio Divinatus, or Lectitio Divinatus, my bad, that first proclaimed that the Emperor of Mankind was actually the incarnate God of humanity, first appeared throughout the Imperium of Man, though each had its own subtle variations and differences in basic theology. These forms of worship appeared first on those primitive planets of the Imperium that had regressed technologically during the long, terror-filled years of the Age of Strife. The number of these cults multiplied or exponentially following the Emperor's ultimate sacrifice to save mankind from the rule of the War Master Horus and the Dark Gods at the end of the Horus Heresy, and his subsequent interment within the Golden Throne. This event was hailed by believers as the Emperor's ascension back to divinity within the immaterial. Most of these cults would gradually fade away, while others prospered, eventually absorbing the weaker ones. The more successful cults of the Emperor's worship spread through forms of worship to other planets. The strongest of all the early imperial cults of the Lectitio Divinatus was called the Temple of the Savior Emperor. This cult had the advantage over the others in that it was based on Terra, and that its leader had been a successful and respected officer of the imperial army who had fought at the siege of Terra, defending the heart of the Imperium in its darkest hour. This holy man had renamed himself Fetidicus, I guess. Man, wow. And I had begun to preach his teachings concerning the divinity of the Emperor to anyone who would listen. This faith spread among the members of the reformed Astra Militarum and the Navis Imperialis during the time of rebirth, and had seen at first hand of the horrors of chaos, but also the lowly scribes and minor adepts of the Adeptus Terra. The faith was then spread by those individuals to other planets. When Fetidicus died at the age of 120 standard Terran years, the temple had more than a billion followers on Terra, and untold faithful throughout the Imperium's segmentum solar. In the wake of the chaos and anarchy of the Horus Heresy, the Temple of the Savior Emperor provided a message of hope and reunification through a common faith. Cults who rejected being absorbed, or who couldn't be absorbed because of widely different theology, saw themselves being persecuted by fanatical mobs who preferred the Savior Emperor's increasingly orthodox belief system. Officially, the temple rejected this violence and performed in its name, though, in fact, it unofficially welcomed the elimination of those rival sects it saw as heretical and threats to its own growing political power. This development culminated in the 32nd millennium, by which time almost two-thirds of the Imperium's population followed the teachings of the Temple of the Savior Emperor. The exceptions being the Adeptus Astartes, as the Space Marines have never formally acknowledged the divinity of the Emperor in a nod to his wishes, and the Lost Imperial Truth and the Adeptus Mechanicus of Mars, who had their own form of worship in the cult Mechanicus. The temple's importance, influence, and power rapidly outmatched that of any other Lectitio Divinatus cult dedicated to the Emperor worship, including its closest rival, the Confederation of Light. The Adeptus Ministorum, in the early 32nd millennium, in recognition of its unprecedented political power over the minds of humanity, the Temple of the Savior Emperor was officially recognized by the High Lords of Terra as the state religion of the Imperium of Man. It also became an official adepta of the Imperium's government as the Adeptus Ministorum, wholly separate from the Adeptus Terra. A few centuries later, the ecclesiarch Venerus II received a seat on the Ministorum Imperialis and joined the ranks of the High Lords of Terra, and after 300 Terran years, this seat was made permanent. The power of the ecclesiarchy continued to grow, increasing its hold over the minds and beliefs of the imperial citizenry. Those who wouldn't follow its teachings were declared unbelievers, ostracized, and on occasion even executed. The vast territories of the Imperium were organized into different dioceses led by the ecclesiarchy's cardinals. These powerful religious and political figures were responsible for the hordes of imperial missionaries and preachers that were released to tend to the spiritual needs of the faithful in hundreds of worlds. Lavish shrines, of course, impressive temples, and majestic cathedrals dedicated to the God Emperor were built throughout the Imperium. Millions of religious pilgrims soon began making their way across the galaxy to visit particularly the important religious locations, such as the world where a particular imperial saint had performed their most famous miracle. If you want to know who the imperial saints are, I did a video on it. So if you want to check that out, you can, if you're new. Yeah. That's why I'm not saying anything about the imperial saints, because I already did a video on it. Yeah. Have performed their most famous miracle. In time, the sheer number of pilgrims who arrived on certain worlds became an economic activity in and of itself, for the ecclesiarchy and entire planets were dedicated to worship and directly ruled by the Adeptus Ministorums, or as so-called shrine worlds. Particularly important, shrine worlds might become the religious seat of an entire diocese stretching across a subsector or sector, and so a cardinal would take up residence there. These planets became known as cardinal worlds. Alright, so we're going to get into the Confederation of Light here, because I think it is important. So, the only threat to the ecclesiarchal spiritual and political dominance in the Imperium was the Confederation of Light. Based upon the planet's Dimamar, these penitent face ideals of poverty and humble living clearly contradicted the teachings of the ecclesiarchy. The orthodox view of the Temple of the Savior Emperor was that sacrifices of wealth and money to the Adeptus Ministorum and taxes, tithes, and other gifts were necessary to enhance the citizens of the Imperium's access to salvation, ensure that the Emperor's light reached every corner of the galaxy through his missions. Politically, the Confederation of Light also held that the state church should stand apart from politics of the Imperium. Yeah? Providing spiritual support to the peoples of the galaxy, but not serving as the dominant force in the governance of the Emperor's realm. Such position was a direct threat to the political power of the ecclesiarchy, which had become the most powerful component of imperial government, transforming it largely into theocracy by the end of the 35th millennium. The Confederation proved too difficult for Ministorum agents to infiltrate, and the ecclesiarchy turned to violence, supported in its efforts by the unanimous vote of the High Lords of Terra, who declared the onset of the First War of Faith, largely to ensure that the imperial political stability was not damaged by the emergence of religious plurality and possible religious violence between different sects. Yeah, because we just can't have different opinions on stuff. We have to have sex and stuff like that, different groups and whatnot. Anyways, I'm sorry. The entire Confederation was declared heretical, and the forces of the Astra Militarum, the Navis Imperialis, and thousands of fanatical zealots from the church's Fraterus militia were unleashed upon it and bent on its destruction. Only a few cells in hidden shrines of the Confederation managed to survive, and the power of the Orthodox ecclesiarchy over the minds of humanity, for better or worse, was made unassailable. By the end of the 33rd millennium, every civilized imperial world was furnished with its own cathedral, and coffers of the ecclesiarchy were filled with the offerings and tithes from teemed billions of God Emperor's faithful. This wealth was squandered in building increasingly numbers of larger and more lavish cathedrals and to fund more wars of faith, intended not to save the souls of humanity, but to secure the ecclesiarchy's position of political power within the imperium and wealth of its prelates. Okay, I may have to do a video on this. Okay, where is it? Okay, the Imperial Creed. The Imperial Creed is the body of doctrines and articles of faith in the God Emperor, which is preached across the Imperium. It is the word of the Emperor as related by his saints, and forms the core belief shared by every worshipper across the length and breadth of the Imperium, regardless of the form of worship practiced on the world of their birth. In practice, the Imperial Creed operates on several levels. In the rarefied atmosphere of the Holy Synod, in the Synod Ministra, and cardinals debate endlessly the minutiae of the words of the saints. Arguments about the exact meaning of a particular phrase might rage for solar decades. Ain't that the truth? My goodness. Anyways, even standard centuries, causing bitter schisms amongst the various factions as the prelates decry one another as benighted fools, dangerous reformers, or even heretics. Indeed, there have been many occasions when outright violence has erupted between factions holding opposing views on such interpretations. Because we just can't have disagreements. We're the right ones. But anyways. And in the most extreme of cases, the cardinals of neighboring dioceses have mustered vast armies from the ranks of their congregations and made war upon their erstwhile brothers in faith. Every solar day, the synods disseminate realms of pronouncements and clarifications of learned texts and annotations of existing ones. The cardinals are expected to preach such tracts to those below them, thus propagating the true word across the imperium. In practice, no one person can be conversant in such a vast body of doctrine, and huge armies of scholars are employed to identify the relevant passages for their masters and to file the remainder away in the vast archive shrines of the Ministorum. The second level on which the Imperial Creed operates is at the opposite end of the scale. In the soul, every human being in the Imperium, the vast majority of the faithful exist amidst unending toil and oppression, where the only alternative to a life of object servitude is to be shipped out out to a faraway war to be deleted at the hands of some red mist thirsty alien monstrosity. For many, the act of worship is the only brief respite that they have from the brutal reality of day-to-day life in the Imperium, an opportunity to escape the cruelty of their overseers before returning once more to their bitter labors. Of course, those who tarry overlong before the altar are wont to be punished harshly, and many have been condemned to service in the conflict armies of the Penal legions, for returning from their shrine a mere solar minute past their allotted time. Nevertheless, reverence of the Emperor as the divine savior of mankind is the one thing shared by people across the Imperium. Only those ensnared by dark gods themselves or thralled to some manner of alien dominant reject the Emperor. A person might be the very worst kind of scum, a rebel, a pirate, or a slaver of flesh, rejecting all the laws of the Imperium, yet still they will hold true to their belief in God Emperor of mankind. All right, and then the tenets of faith I will do in another video and all that. So now we're going to get to the biblical side of things here. And we're going to start Numbers 18:1. And we're going to we're going to talk about the Levitical priesthood. Right? And there's a lot of, stuff that people get wrong, right? And like the tithe. What is the tithe? Anyways, Numbers 18:1. And the Lord said unto Aaron, Thou and thy sons in the Father's house with thee shall bear the iniquity of the sanctuary, and thou and thy sons with thee shall bear the iniquity of your priesthood, and thy brethren also the tribe of Levi, the tribe of thy father, bring now with thee, that they may be joined unto thee and minister unto thee. But thou and thy sons with thee shall minister before the tabernacle of witness. So these guys are basically, you can say, the lawyers, right? And you would go to them, like you'd say, if you hurt somebody, you would go to them, and then you had to have 3 witnesses that corroborated your story. So it wasn't like, vigilante justice or anything like that. And you pointed and said, he did this and that was that. No, you had to have evidence, right? But anyways, and they shall keep the charge and the charge of the tabernacle. Only they shall not come nigh the vessels of the sanctuary and altar, neither they nor ye also. Deleted. And they shall be joined unto thee, and keep the charge of the tabernacle of congregation, for all the service of the tabernacle. And a stranger shall not come nigh unto you. Okay. So the Levites are the ones who are the priests and the high priests and stuff. Numbers 35. In the cities they shall have dwelt. Now, he's talking about these cities that the Levites and stuff will be in. And the suburbs of them shall be for their cattle and their goods and all their beasts. This comes from the tithe. So the tithe is food, okay? And it was to go in these storehouses and to be brought for, sacrifice, all that. But the people got to partake in that, and they would store it up for, foreigners who would come in, homeless, stuff like that. But we'll get to that. And their goods and their beasts in the suburbs of the city, which ye shall give unto the Levites, shall reach from the wall of the city and outward 1,000 cubits round about. And ye shall measure from without the city on the east side to 2,000 cubits. On the south side, 2,000 cubits. On the west side, 2,000 cubits. On the north, you guys get it. Okay, and the city shall be in the midst. This shall be to them the suburbs of the cities. So the Levites, they weren't just in Jerusalem, right? They were in pretty much every city within Israel. Okay, and like I said, they were the lawfare. They were the ones who you would go and they would interpret if you committed sin or whatever, according to the commandments, right, of God. Okay. Right, and so all the cities which you shall give unto the Levites shall be 48 cities. So 48 cities. Where's the sanctuary cities? Am I going to get to that? Hold on. Okay, and among the cities which you shall give unto the Levites, there be 6 cities for refuge. Why? I don't know why I missed that. Which ye shall appoint for the manslayer, that he may flee thither, and to them ye shall add 42 cities. Okay, so what would happen is if somebody even accidentally, deleted somebody, and it was an accident, they would flee to these sanctuary cities where, the Levites and stuff were, and they would conduct their investigation and all that, and also to keep this up. So back in ancient days, if someone, let's say, killed your kin, your family member, you would have a designated guy who would go after that person, right? And, oops, sorry. So these people who accidentally or, did the deed, even if it was on purpose, you would go to these cities. That way they can conduct their business and see what is true or not, right? How many witnesses they can get. It's an investigation, kind of. And you weren't allowed to do anything within these cities. You couldn't hurt the guy or anything, right? You had to wait until everything was investigated. Okay. Deuteronomy 14 and 14:26. Or, you know what? Okay. So this is about, the tithe. And if you couldn't make it, right? Check this out. Or here. And thou shalt eat before the Lord thy God in the place which he shall choose to place his name there. Also, you can think of as these sacrifices, right, as meals with God, kind of, right? So God would smell it, see if it was unblemished, and he would go, okay. And either the priest would eat it, would eat the food or whatever. And I'm sorry, I forgot to say this. The Levites don't have an inheritance, right? So they didn't have land, they didn't have this. That's why they had these designated places where you put the cattle and stuff, so that cattle and all that could live before they were either offered or for food for people, whoever needed it. And what was kind of cool is that every farmer, right, in Israel had to have a certain part of land to where the homeless could go in and eat and grab some. I think that's pretty cool. We're going to see that here too, but I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay. Place which shall choose to place his name there, the tithe of thy corn, thy wine, thine oil, and the firstlings of the herds and flocks. There was no money there. There's no money. Isn't that interesting? So if you go to a church, give them a Snickers bar, eat the top of that Snickers bar, because you got to partake in the tithe as well. You're going to see. And just say, hey, that's my tithe. But anyways, don't do that. As long as they're saying that it's a love offering, right? That it's not required. You're required to pay the 10% tithe. I've heard that too many times. You're not, by the way. Okay, anyways, I'm sorry. And if the way be too long for thee, so that art not able to carry it, or if the place be too far from thee, which the Lord thy God shall choose to set his name there, when the Lord thy God hath blessed thee, then shalt thou turn it into money, okay? Bind up the money in thine hand, and shalt go into the place which the Lord thy God shall choose. Ready? And thou shalt bestow that money for whatsoever thy soul lusteth after, for oxen, or for sheep, or for wine, or for strong drink. Oh, doesn't sound like drinking is a sin now, does it? Like, which you hear a lot now, getting drunk and completely obliterated or obliviated, or I forget, inebriated, and you're still able to think. You know what I mean? And you don't do it all the time. But anyways, or for whatsoever the soul desireth, and thou shalt eat there before the Lord thy God, and thou shalt rejoice, thou and thine household, and the Levite that is within thy gates, thou shalt not forsake him, for he hath no part nor inheritance with thee. See, they don't have an inheritance. I wonder how many people would be pastors today if they didn't have an inheritance. But anyways, I digress. Okay. I did bring it up. Okay, Deuteronomy 18:1. The priests, the Levites, and all the tribe of Levi shall have no part nor inheritance with Israel. They shall eat the offerings of the Lord made by fire and his inheritance. So they had to trust in the Lord to keep them fed. They also had to tell the truth, right? Or the people aren't going to feed you, and, God won't feed you, we'll just say, right? Okay. Therefore shall they have no inheritance among their brethren. The Lord is their inheritance, as he hath said unto them. And this shall be the priest's due from the people, from them that offer a sacrifice, which it be of ox or sheep, and they shall give it unto the priest the shoulder, and the 2 cheeks, and the maw. The first fruits also thy corn, thy wine, thy oil, and the first fleece of the sheep shalt thou give them. Still no money. Still no money. The only money that we heard was for you to sell that 10% tithe, and turn it into money, and then buy whatever you want, whatever you need. If you want strong drink, have strong drink, right? Where is it? Okay. Hold on. I'm missing something here. Okay. Okay, here we go. I forgot to read this part. Okay. And Levites. And at the end of 3 years thou shalt bring forth all the tithe of thine increase the same year, and shall lay it up within thy gates. And the Levite, because he had no part or nor inheritance with thee, ready? And the stranger, this would be a foreigner, right? And the fatherless and the widow, which are within thy gates, shall come and shall eat and be satisfied. Imagine if we had a system like that today. That the Lord thy God may bless thee in all thy work of thine hand, which thou doest. See what I mean? How it gets construed and people use it, especially Christians, right? Who say the 10% tithe, right? Got to pay that 10% tithe and God will bless you. Well, first of all, it was food, right? It was food. That's what the tithe was. It was food. So that the poor, right? The widow, which in or within thy gates shall come and shall eat and be satisfied. Huh. And it definitely does frustrate me, if you can't tell. Okay. So that. Okay. Okay, I will read this part. So, and ye shall rejoice before the Lord your God, and your sons, and your daughters, and your manservants, and your maidservants, and the Levite that is within your gates, forasmuch he had no part and inheritance with thee. So God is trying to put this out there. He's saying they don't have an inheritance. Now, were there pieces of crap? Probably, right? In everything that you will ever see or do, there will always be pieces of garbage, we'll just say, and who take advantage of the system. Okay. Take heed to thyself that thou offer not thy burnt offerings in every place that thou seest. So pay attention to this part. This goes with the tithe, right? If you're gonna give someone money or whatever, you give it to where God tells you to do it, right? So take heed to thyself that thy offer not thy burnt offerings in every place thou seest, but in the place which the Lord shall choose in one of thy tribes. There thou shalt offer the burnt offerings, and there shalt do all that I command thee. Notwithstanding, thou mayest delete and eat in all thy gates, whatsoever thy soul lusteth after according to the blessing of the Lord thy God, which he hath given thee. The unclean and the clean may eat thereof, as the roebuck, as of the hart. Okay. Interesting. Now, where did my little AI thing go? Oh, here it is. This actually does a pretty good job. So, according to the Bible, priests in the tabernacle had many duties, including serving in the tabernacle. Priests served in the tabernacle and had access to the altar. Oh, and I should say that would be what I was talking about is when they're in Israel. But this is what they were doing when they were in the desert. Serving in the tabernacle, priests served in the tabernacle and had access to the altar. Applying the red mist, priests applied the red mist of sacrifices to the altar. Teaching, priests taught the covenant to people. Purifying, priests purified the house of God. communicating blessings. Priests communicated God's blessings to the people. Preserving. Priests preserved the tabernacle and the temple. Inspecting. Priests inspected people, animals, and fabrics for cleanness. Performing the official duties. Priests performed official duties in the Holy of Holies once a year. Now, the Holy of Holies is where the high priest, and only the high priest, could go. So, there's that. And now we're going to get to the censors, because we all know Warhammer 40k is filled with these, right? Especially with the Adeptus Mechanicus and getting their computers to work. Got to have those prayers, right? Anyways, a censer, a vessel in which incense was presented in the temple, being used by the Jews in the daily offering of incense, and yearly on the Day of Atonement, when the high priest entered the Holy of Holies. So I should probably bring that up. This is kind of interesting here. Maybe not. Okay. So this is what it represents. So KJV, we'll do this. Whoa. Well, that didn't work. Sorry, guys. So, right. And the smoke of the incense, which came with the prayers of the saints, ascended up before God out of the angel's hand. So basically, this is a representation of what's going on in heaven, right? Okay. But I want... Hold on. Let me do this. Okay. Revelation 8:4. Probably should have said the name. And when he had opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of a half an hour. And I saw the 7 angels which stood before God, and them were given 7 trumpets. Another angel came, stood at the altar. See, there's an altar, having a golden censer. And there was given unto him much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of the saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. And the smoke of the incense, which came with the prayers of the saints, ascending up before God out of the angel's hand. And the angel took the censer and filled it with fire of the altar, and cast into the earth. And there were voices, thunderings, and lightnings, and earthquake. And the 7 angels which had 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. So, interesting. Yeah. And yearly on the Day of Atonement, when the high priest entered the Holy of Holies, on the latter occasion the priest filled the censer with live coals from the sacred fire on the altar of burnt offering, and bore it into the sanctuary, where he threw upon the burning coals the sweet incense beaten small, which he had brought in his hand. That's Leviticus chapter 16, 12, and 13. By the way, here's all the things. 2 Chronicles 26:19, Ezekiel 8:11, and then Ecclesiasticus. So, anyways, in this case, the incense was burnt while the high priest held the censer in his hand. But in the daily offering, the censer in which the live coals were brought from the altar of burnt offering was sent down upon the altar of incense. This alone would suggest the probability of some difference of shape between the censers used on these occasions. The daily censers must have had a base or stand to admit their being placed on the golden altar, while those employed on the Day of Atonement were probably furnished with the handle. Okay, you guys get the point. This goes on, but we're running out of time here. So now we're going to get back to the Warhammer stuff, and we're going to get into the organization. Yeah. The ecclesiarchy is not officially part of the Adeptus Terra, but is organized as wholly separate imperial adepta. At its head is the leader of the imperial cult, the high priest known as the ecclesiarch, who by tradition since the 32nd millennium is always one of the Imperium's ruling high lords of Terra. Below him are the cardinals, of which there are several thousand, each of whom oversees the ecclesiarchy's operations and properties in a diocese comprising a sector, subsector, or even a single world of imperial space. Below the cardinals are the priests known as the pontifices, confessors, missionaries, and preachers. Sorry about that. In that order, the clerical order of the ecclesiarchy are open to men and women alike, although men seem to have an advantage in achieving high position because many believe that as men they are closer to the perfection of the God Emperor, whose perfect embodied form was that of the human male. The Adeptus Ministorum's own governing body is the Holy Synod, a conclave composed of ecclesiarchy's most powerful arch-cardinals and cardinals. The Ministorum divides the Imperium's territory across the galaxy into thousands of dioceses, each generally encompassing an entire imperial world. Man, my reading just is turning to mush, man. The exception being Terra, the heart of the Imperium, which possess several dioceses because of their sheer population size and political importance. Some dioceses can encompass several worlds or even an entire sector in the case of the officials granted the extremely powerful rank of Cardinal Astra. A diocese is further divided into parishes centered around the shrine or church. Each diocese is headed by a cardinal, while each parish is headed by an imperial priest with the title of preacher. Ranking between these individuals are priests known as pontifices, whose authority extends over several parishes to serve as administrative go-betweens in large dioceses between preachers and their ruling cardinal. Priests known as missionaries have no administrative duties within a single diocese, but can be deployed to spread the faith of the imperial cult to newly rediscovered human settled worlds. They are always part of the ecclesiarchy's missionary wing that is called the Missionaris Galaxia. Confessors are evangelical zealots who possess a rank within the ecclesiarchy somewhere between preacher and cardinal. Their oratory skill can stir the emotions of entire worlds, leading to them to confess personal heresies and mutations and portray their neighbors as psychers, heretics, and mutants or other deviants. Okay, we're going to read right here. The hierarchy. You have the ecclesiarch, which is the top dog, the arch-cardinal, the cardinal pontifex, like we saw that here, archdeacon, the deacon, firebrands, see that? Legio Aetaris is a loyalist Titan legion of the Collegia Titanica, the military arm of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Okay? Drill abbot, confessor, and preacher. So there you go. We're not going to read all that. Now you guys got all that. So I want to thank you guys, and especially all the new subscribers and all my subscribers, for supporting me, and everyone who watches the video, thank you, whether you dislike it or like it, and you guys keep this thing going, so I love doing this, and I can't thank you guys enough, so thank you. You guys have a wonderful day.